know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk presents fatal mismatches of Billy the Kid imposter, Brushy Bill Roberts, with the real Billy Bonney. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Imposter Hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. The Billy the Kid imposter hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts had to face Brushy's fatal mismatches with Billy Bonney. On the level of just give up were Brushy's August 26, 1879 birth date, making him under 2 at Billy's Fort Sumner shooting death on July 14, 1881, and Billy's corpse's identification in his July 15, 1881 coroner's jury report. Other mismatches were impassable hurdles. Unlike Brushy, Billy was very literate, fluent in Spanish, and a bicultural anti-Santa Fe ring freedom fighter, not a typical outlaw. So Brushy and his promoters, WilliamVMorrison and C.L. Sonneshin, relied on the hoaxer's toolkit: concealment, lying, and counting on audience ignorance. Literate Billy was an impassable hurdle. The hoax ended up calling Brushy illiterate to fake that his so-called special knowledge was not from reading up. Billy himself referred to his ability to read. In his Dudley Court of Inquiry testimony for May 28, 1879, he stated, Mr. McSween wrote a note to the officer in charge asking what the soldiers were placed there for. I read the note myself. He handed it to me to read. And in his letter of December 12, 1880, to Governor Lew Wallace, he wrote, I noticed in the Las Vegas Gazette a piece which stated that Billy the Kid, the name by which I'm known in the country, was the captain of a band of outlaws. Others referred to Billy's reading. Walter Noble Burns, for his 1926 book, The Saga of Billy the Kid, quoted Billy's fellow regulator, Frank Cole. Billy had a little schooling, and he could read and write as well as anybody else around here. He didn't talk like a backwoodsman. His speech was that of an intelligent and fairly well-educated man. Billy's writing out a bill of sale for a horse was witnessed by Henry Hoyt, George J. Howard, and James E. McMasters. Hoyt, in his letter of April 27, 1927, to Lew Wallace, Jr., enclosed a copy of that bill of sale, explaining that before he learned of Billy's other letters, he thought it was the only known example of his handwriting. On its back, Hoyt had written, copy of bill of sale written by William H. Bonney, alias Billy the Kid, October 24, 1878, at Tascosa, Panhandle of Texas, USA, and given to me for my protection in case my ownership of this horse, which Billy had presented to me, was ever questioned. It is witnessed by Howard and McMasters, owners of the leading store in Tascosa, where it was written. Additionally, Billy had intellectual brilliance and a sophisticated vocabulary. He even correctly spelled indictments in his letter of March 13, 1879, to Governor Lew Wallace, writing, "I have indictments against me for things that happened in the late Lincoln County War." His eloquence is confirmed from his letters, his transcripts of legal testimonies, and his newspaper interviews. His March 13, 1879 letter to Governor Lew Wallace stated, "I have no wish to fight any more. Indeed, I have not raised an arm since your proclamation." On March 20, 1879, he wrote to Wallace, "I am not afraid to die like a man fighting, but I would not like to be killed like a dog unarmed." For his June 8, 1878 deposition with investigator Frank Warner Angel about witnessing John Tunstall's ring murder, he stated, "Shortly afterwards we heard 2 or 3 separate and distinct shots, and the remark was then made by Middleton that they, the attacking party, must have killed Tunstall." For an April 16, 1881 interview in the Messiah News, he was quoted, "If mob law is going to rule, better dismiss judge and sheriff and let all take chances alike. I think it hard that I should be the only one to suffer the extreme penalty of the law." Billy even used correct legalese, as shown in his October 24, 1878 Hoyt Bill of Sale, which stated, "Know all persons by these presents that I do hereby sell and deliver to Henry F. Hoyt 1 sorrel horse." And in his March 13, 1879 letter to Lew Wallace, he wrote, "If it is in your power to annul those indictments, I hope you will do so," close quote, with annulment being the proper action rather than pardon before sentencing. In contrast, Brushy Bill was a loudish, grammatically primitive country bumpkin. C.L. Sonneshin, in his 1955 Brushy backing book, alias Billy the Kid, quoted Brushy's May 24, 1949 letter to Morrison. "I ain't putting out nothing." That book has multiple other examples. Brushy's take on Billy's March 4, 1881 letter to Lew Wallace was, "I done everything I promised him to do." That was Brushy's take on real Billy's, "I have done everything that I promised you I would, and you have done nothing that you promised me." Brushy's aping of Billy's April 15, 1881 letter to attorney Edgar Capeless was, "He done all he could for me." Billy had written, "Mr. A.J. Fountain was appointed to defend me and has done the best he could for me." The even bigger picture on Billy's literacy was content, reflecting his repeatedly risking his life to testify against Santa Fe ring criminals. Brushy was unaware of the testimonies, or that Billy was a political zealot, or that the Lincoln County War was an anti-ring freedom fight. The response of the Brushy hoax to the literate Billy mismatch was ignoring or hiding Billy's literacy. Billy's letters were faked as written by a, quote, friend, though that friend had to be with him from 1878 to 1881 in Tascosa, Texas, San Patricio, New Mexico Territory, Lincoln incarceration for the pardon bargain, and in his solitary confinement in the Santa Fe jail. A variation on this writer-friend scam is seen in WilliamVMorrison's October 3, 1956 letter to an E.B. Fowler. Morrison wrote, Since you mention handwriting comparison, you will be interested to know that we made a scientific study in the laboratory of the leading expert in St. Louis. It was determined that more than one hand wrote those letters. We were unable to definitely establish that the kid wrote anything. Historians accepted all of the writings as being those of the kid without question until I raised the issue. Of course, historians and writers are never interested in legal evidence. It disturbs their findings. In fact, Morrison's so-called expert mistook Billy's letters as by two people because Billy's handwriting looks different in his 1881 Santa Fe jail letters and 1879 pardon bargain letters. That's because his Spencerian script lost its rightward slant in the jail letters for lack of a desk for proper positioning. But as I showed in talks 4 through 7, linked below, from my book, Billy the Kid's Writings, Words, and Wit, Billy's personally modified alphabet is identical in all his letters, and all the letters have his idiosyncrasies of not capitalizing the first word of a sentence and misspelling answer as ANNSER. As to ANNSER, his first pardon bargain letter to Lew Wallace of March 13, 1879, states, "Please send me an answer, ANNSER, telling me what you can do." Waiting for an answer, ANNSER, I remain your obedient servant, W.H. Bonney. His March 4th, 1881, Santa Fe jail letter to Lew Wallace states, "I wrote you a little note the day before yesterday, but have received no answer, ANNSER." His March 27, 1881, Santa Fe jail letter to Lew Wallace states, "Send answer, ANNSER, by bearer." Bilingual Billy was an impassable hurdle. Real Billy Bonney was bilingual. As Pat Garrett stated in his 1882 book, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, Billy talked Spanish fluently as any Mexican. Henry Hoyt wrote in his 1929 book, A Frontier Doctor, he spoke Spanish like a native. Addressing Spanish-speaking WilliamVMorrison simply lied in his August 8, 1952 Kiwanis Club talk in Silver City titled, "He Said He Was Billy the Kid." He claimed Brushy Bill spoke Spanish and 3 Indian dialects. This fakery didn't make it into Alias Billy the Kid, but later Brushy backing authors attempted a fix-up by claiming Brushy's tales of living in Mexico proved he knew the language. There was worse for the hoax. Billy's being bilingual linked to his biculturalism, which fueled his political zeal. As he declared in his July 3, 1878 Regulator Manifesto, "Steal from the poorest or richest American or Mexican, and the full measure of the injury you do shall be visited upon the property of Mr. Catron." Billy's Hispanic alliance was made clear by a Teddy Blue Abbott in his 1955 book, We Pointed Them North, Recollections of a Cowpuncher. He wrote, "The Lincoln County troubles was still going on, and you had to be either for Billy the Kid or against him. It wasn't my fight. It was the Mexicans that made a hero of him." Billy's biculturalism may be credited with bringing Hispanic fighters from San Patricio and Picacho into the Lincoln County war battle. In contrast, Brushy Bill was a racist who peppered his quotes reprinted by oblivious C.L. Sonneshin and alias Billy the Kid, with the hatefully spewed N-word. About Fort Stanton's Black 9th Cavalrymen, racist Brushy fabricated. If we could have kept them, N-words, out there at Stanton, we would have whipped Pepin's posse. In fact, no Black 9th Cavalrymen took part in the Lincoln County War Battle shooting on July 19, 1878. As real Billy testified in the Dudley Court of Inquiry on May 29, 1879, it was Commander Dudley's 3 white soldiers, likely officers, who fired a volley at him and others escaping the burning McSween house. And Billy would have known and respected that, like him, idealistic Black cavalrymen, Private James Bush and Sergeant Houston Lusk, risked their lives to testify against Dudley at that court of inquiry. Brushy's later backers hid his despicable racism by forging his transcripts to delete his N-word. Literate Brushy was an added dilemma. Contrary to the hoax's faked illiteracy, he was able to read up for his Billy the Kid impersonation. As bad, his handwriting didn't match real Billy's. Samples of his printing and cursive script are in Sonneshin's collected papers. On screen is an example of Brushy Bill's printing for his notes on his fabricated Old West escapades. On screen is an example of Brushy Bill's cursive handwriting. The page appears to be Morrison's alteration of Brushy's type note, followed by Morrison's cursive handwritten edition, followed by Brushy's scrawled cursive edit using small case I instead of uppercase for the pronoun I, and having random capitalizing. On screen is real Billy Bonney's Hoyt bill of sale, showing that his Spencerian cursive penmanship is totally different from Brushy's handwriting. Historian Donald Klein, in his 1988 unpublished manuscript, Brushy Bill Roberts, I Wasn't Billy the Kid, found in the census of 1910 that Brushy stated he could read and write and had attended school to the 4th or 5th grade. Klein wrote that Brushy continued writing letters right up to his death. Early on, Morrison and Sonneshin missed the pitfalls of Brushy's literacy, so didn't hide it. That resulted in slip-ups exposing the illiteracy lie when he was alive, and then, after his death, in their 1955 alias Billy the Kid. Here are examples. Brushy referenced his note writing in transcripts of his tape-recorded interviews with Morrison. His June 16, 1949 interview in Hamilton, Texas, states, 69 years is a long time to recollect. Some I made those notes you saw. You mentioned to me some names I can't recall right now. I gave you a list of some of those men. I did. In his interview of August 18, 1949 in Lincoln, Brushy referred to the Lincoln County War battle, saying, we lost 4 men, but about 8 or 7 of us got away. I don't remember, but you read my notebook. On December 18, 1950, Morrison wrote to an attorney, Dennis Zimmerman, in Tulia, Texas, apparently considering a fake handwriting match for Brushy. We have handwriting of the kid as well as handwriting of the claimant. In a letter of February 14, 1951, to an Ola Eberhard, Morrison described writings of recently deceased Brushy, stating, Billy, what he faked as Brushy's name, gave me his diary books some months ago. On October 8, 1952, Morrison wrote to a George G. Sweat, an apparent handwriting analyst, that he'd made a photostatic copy of Billy's Hoyt bill of sale. Morrison wrote, "I informed Dr. Sonneshin along the lines discussed at your office with reference to your investigation. He is anxious to include your opinion in our first book, if it is possible to establish a connection between the photostats of Billy the Kid letters and writings of Brushy Bill." That meant in 1952, Morrison and Sonneshin had not yet settled on the illiteracy scam, and proved is that Sonneshin colluded in its creation. Brushy's literacy also crept into Sonneshin's writing of Alias Billy the Kid, which claimed his illiteracy. But since Sonneshin used Morrison's taped interviews of Brushy, he accidentally forgot to edit out all of Brushy's quotes about literacy. For example, using real Billy's December 12, 1880 letter to Wallace, Brushy had stated, "We went to Las Vegas, where I read that Billy the Kid had killed Carlisle." And from Billy's Santa Fe jail letters, Brushy stated, "I wrote to Governor Wallace to come and talk to me." Alias Billy the Kid's first footnote states that Brushy's account of his life was, quote, "assembled from Robert's notebooks, correspondence, and conversation." The book also refers to his writing and autobiography. His notebooks are described as covering, quote, "practically the entire West." Sonneshin added that Brushy kept, quote, "copious notes" on his post-Fort Sumner shooting scene life. Sonneshin even quoted a May 24, 1949 letter by Brushy to Morrison to indicate that he was secretive about being Billy. Brushy was quoted, "I don't like for other people to meddle with my business." And Brushy is described by Sonneshin as, quote, "writing up his history the way he wanted it told. He set down his story in a series of paper-covered composition books and a couple of loose-leaf notebooks." Sonneshin complained that Brushy's notes rambled about his roaming through Arizona, Montana, Oregon, Oklahoma, Indian Territory, Wyoming, and Nebraska, and Old Mexico, with outlaws, rustlers, Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians, and being employed as a bronco buster and a ranch worker. And that was before he was 17. Sonneshin also referred to Brushy's 3 prompt notebooks he made on Billy the Kid, which he destroyed after the failed Governor Mabry pardon hearing. Though Sonneshin rationalized that Brushy feared the information could get him arrested as Billy the Kid, as likely was Brushy's post-hearing fear that they proved he was an imposter rehearsing his lines. Later brushing-bagging authors W.C. Jameson and Frederick Bean, in their 1998 book, The Return of the Outlaw Billy the Kid, having seen Brushy's notebooks, admitted he wrote with a scrawl and had bad grammar and misspellings. Brushy's relative, Royale Hawes, for his 2015 book, Brushy Bill, Proof That His Claim to be Billy the Kid Was a Hoax, provided an April 1st, 1949 letter by Brushy to an imposter named Orrin Artius Woodman, who claimed to be Kit Carson. Brushy wrote, "We are doing fine. Hope this finds you the same. The wind blows every day and it's cold. Wheat looks good. Cattle, they are fat." Then there is the hoax's top secret document. In Sonishin's collected papers, it's the typed Parkinson affidavit attesting to hearing a December 1st, 1950 recording Morrison made of Brushy the day after his pardon hearing failure. It was Morrison's rushed attempt to resuscitate the hoax, and his scheme was to stress Brushy's literacy to prove his special knowledge. Apparently written by Morrison for a non-historical Mrs. S.N. Parkinson, it was signed by her on April 18, 1951. She attested to hearing Brushy confirm his writings and to her seeing his notebook and diaries. She also swore to a greater secret. She attested that Morrison got Brushy to alter them to match Billy Bonney. Morrison lied to her that Brushy had originally used different names and dates in his writings to hide his Billy the Kid identity. This Parkinson affidavit explains Sonishin's noting in Alias Billy the Kid that, quote, Brushy had spent time with Morrison correcting his narrative before his death. And Morrison, on April 12, 1977, wrote to a Lawrence K. Mooney, we started to correct passages in his memoirs and the letters he had sent me before he died. Mrs. S.N. Parkinson attested that she was, quote, personally acquainted with William H. Roberts, note the fake name to match William Henry Bonney, also known as William H. Bonney, Billy the Kid, Texas Kid, Hugo Kid, Brushy Bill Roberts, and O.L. Roberts, who is now deceased. Excerpted, Mrs. Parkinson swore. The affiant states that she was present, together with Mr. William V. Morrison, at the residence of William V. Morrison, at which time they witnessed a recording in which William V. Morrison interrogated the said William H. Roberts with reference to the life and happenings of the said Roberts, that the said Roberts admitted the ownership of 5 certain and definite diary books in the possession of William V. Morrison, which books he identified, and he admitted that certain alterations had been made by him and Mr. Morrison to correspond with and represent the true facts as they would be, that certain names and dates had been changed for the reason that the said Roberts had been covering up certain facts during his lifetime to withhold his true identity through fear of apprehension for crimes he had committed as William H. Bonney, alias Billy the Kid, in New Mexico. She then swore to seeing a notebook with ink script, which Brushy said was written by his own hand. It was titled, This Book, The Private Life of Brushy Bill, was wrote in 1925 and was signed Brushy Bill Old Scout. She also described his, quote, original diary books concerning his life. For book number 4, she wrote, it was, quote, blueback composition titled The Life of Ollie Roberts or Brushy Bill or the Texas Kid, containing 128 pages with changes on the first page from Ollie Roberts to Billy Roberts and the year of birth from 1869 to 1859. Note that she was seeing Morrison's forgery, changing Brushy's name and birth date to match Billy's. Nevertheless, she noted that Brushy had signed its final page as Al, Brushy Bill, the outlaw horse rider. This was in keeping with her describing the other Old West personas Brushy used in his writings. Added to her affidavit was also Billy the Kid history, lifted from traceable sources, and having her call the Maybury pardon hearing not a, quote, fair trial. She concluded, "This affiant further states that the said William H. Roberts openly admitted during his interview and recording on December 1st, 1950, that he was Billy the Kid." So the big secret was that literate Brushy could indeed study up for his biggest role. In the hoax's transition to the illiteracy claim, Morrison and Sonneshan floated a ploy that Brushy hid his handwriting to hide being Billy the Kid. This silliness appeared in an undated type note, likely from 1951 and by Morrison, and in Sonneshan's collected papers. It stated, "Little things show how careful Brushy was not to give himself away. He always printed his brief notes and got somebody else to write his letters." At times, Morrison tried to play both sides, as in a letter on January 6, 1956, to a Rick Steinke that Brushy could not read or write for more than 25 years. Unexplained was this mysterious loss of literacy at age 65 in Billy the Kid years. Finally, Morrison and Sonneshan settled on faked illiteracy. In a July 12, 1955 letter to historian Robert Mullin, Morrison wrote, "Brushy could not read." Sonneshan joined in, proving that he was a liar since he had the Parkinson affidavit and copies of Brushy's writings in his collected papers. He inadvertently revealed why the hoax had settled on illiteracy in Dale L. Walker's 1972 biography of him, C.L. Sonneshan, Grassroots Historian. Sonneshan gave the hoax's mantra, quote, "Brushy Bill was not a literate man and could not have read up on the subject." Ultimately, Brushy's undoing was less his literacy and more that his impersonation had a built-in mismatch with real Billy. He was impersonating Billy as a dime novel version of an outlaw, uncouth and unschooled. This yielded awkward attempts to make his fictional Billy, known as a serial murderer, rustler, and gang leader, as being not so bad. But easily tempted into garrulous confabulating in his Morrison tape recordings, Brushy fabricated even more killings for himself as Billy, adding personally shooting Andrew Buckshot Roberts, Bob Beckwith, and John Chisholm's cowboys at $5 per head to reduce Chisholm's financial debt to him. But by his pardon hearing as Billy Bonney, overwhelmed Brushy took no chances with his own neck in case they accepted him as Billy and declared that he'd killed no one at all, though the requested pardon was for real Billy's killings. In the talks to follow, we'll see that despite efforts of Brushy Bill Roberts, William V. Morrison, and C.L. Sonneshan, the fatal mismatches couldn't be hidden when Brushy faced experts and a fact-checking press in his pardon hearing as Billy the Kid.